Welcome to this rendering video. If you're here, you're obviously maybe new, or you're a plasterer and you just fancy having a watch, see how somebody else does it. And on this video, I'm going to absolutely cover every stage and every step. I'm going to try and go slowly over it. I'm going to try and talk about loads of different things, different backgrounds, why you might want to render, why you had to render, whether it's for practical reasons or it's just for the visual and the actual beauty of the rendering. So where to start when it comes to rendering? And to me, it has to be with the mixing process, and that sort of goes side by side with whatever the background is. So if you have a high suction background, really old block or red black brick, the high suction means that they will soak the render in, they'll soak the cement in really quickly. So we'll have to talk about the mixes and we'll have to talk about controlling the suction. Both these are the very first stage and step of the rendering job. Without them, everything else is doomed to fail. Before we jump into the mixes and the backgrounds, the reasons that you might want to get rendering done or need to have your rendering done is obviously it may be new, so you're going to want to get it rendered. You might have new block, you want to get it rendered, you're going to need to get it rendered. Two, if it's in bad condition and it's fallen off, it's actually become dangerous from falling off and possibly letting damp and moisture into the house. You're going to need and want to get that done. And third, if it just looks shabby, some cracks in it, and it just doesn't look very nice and appealing, you might want to just make it look better. So there's the cosmetic reasons, and then there's the real reasons that you need to get it done. Back to the background, and one thing you're going to want to make sure and do, this is first and foremost, you can do this even before you start mixing or as the mix is being prepared by the mixer if you're lucky enough to have one. You're going to want to make sure there's no dust on the walls, and that's new and old. You'll tend to find new builds, there's quite a lot of dust around from cutting out, drilling, just other general work. There could be dust and dirt on the walls, so you want to make sure your background's clean, dust free as possible. I tend to clean the old walls or new walls down with just a soft brush, and you can also dampen them as well and rinse the, if you're outside you can power wash them. Just really do want to have a sound surface to work over. So now let's talk about the mixes. So if it's really old or it has red brick, old block that's really high suction, you're going to probably want to scud coat it, or at least give it a coat of ASBR before you would scratch coat. But for this video, we're just going to go with buckles and braces, the whole shebang. We're going to talk about scud coat right now. I'm going to give you the mix, what I would mix generally for an old job. Again, you can do this on new block if you want, but fresh new block, a wee light dampen down would be good enough. But let's just start with the scud coat here, and we'll go through that and then talk about applying it too. So for the mix, here's my big secret, guys. I would usually do 2 plastering sand to 1 cement. That's 2 to 1. It's a very strong sounded mix, but it's not so strong when you actually look at what I'm doing on the video here. It's a slurry coat, it's the scud coat, it's wet. So the wetter your mix, the weaker it tends to be as well. So it's not just as strong as it would be if you mix it up a bit stiffer. Secondly, I want to talk about what I would add. So on the likes of this job, I would add a capful of mortar mix or plasticizer, whatever you want to call it really. I would add a capful of waterproofer, probably the Pink Larson waterproofer in general. And when I say a capful, I literally mean the lid from the bottle they come with, and that's per mix of a small belly mixer, nothing bigger. If it's bigger, you have to start making these quantities bigger. Um, or you could keep it all into the same bucket. It'll work out the same if it's one bucket of water. Usually, this is what I put into the bucket of water before I start mixing. And the only thing left to go in for a job like this would be SBR. Now, with SBR, I do put a good squirt in, basically. I colour the water till it's sort of white and cloudy. And that's the whole secret, guys. The next thing is you want to just really get your mix right, the water. Now, if all that water doesn't go in, that'll start me for the next mix. I'll fill the water up again, and I'll put all the same additives in. If there's a wee bit left over at the end of the job, it's no big deal. I can wait maybe and use it in the scratch coat to get rid of it, or if I can pour it out somewhere sensible, I will. I just don't throw it around windows, guys, because SBR is very hard to clean. Let's talk about applying Scud coat. So obviously you're going to want to cover up as much skin as possible. Cover your eyes, cover your hands, wear old clothes. People have brushed this on before. I've plastered over jobs where builders have prepped it by painting on the Scud coat. Nowhere near as good as an actual Scud coat splashed on the way I'm doing it. This to me has the best key. Key is grip, key is bond to the wall. So to me, this is the best way to go about applying it, guys. And of course, previous of me applying this Scud coat here, I did wet down and brush the walls very, very well. Another wee quick note I want to make for you is any joints or cracks that you aren't happy with, you could scud it first and then worry about them in the scratch coat, which we're going to talk about now. So obviously the scratch coat, you're going to be applying it with hawk and trowel, and then using a scratcher or a scarifier to mark the surface, so that again, key for the next coat. Every coat you do is for the next coat. So I'll go through the mix on that also. But first, if it's really, really hot and dry day with quick hot suction, you could potentially scratch same day, but I wouldn't 100% recommend it. I would recommend leaving it at least a full day for your Scud coat to go off before you start scratch coating your walls. To me, that's going to give you the optimum strength. That's going to be the best strength of render that you're going to get if you're allowing them to cure in between coats. And also with high suction like this, I would wet down the Scud coat before I would scratch it, and that's just again to help to control suction. But let's jump into the mix of the scratch coat before we talk about applying it and setting beads and rules. So typically, again, might sound strong, but it possibly does depend on the type of sand you have. Here we have a good gritty plastering sand, and I don't know many plasters that don't scratch with this ratio, and it's 3 to 1. 3 plastering sand, 1 cement. Quite simple, and fills the belly pretty much right up, and fills the wheelbarrow pretty much right up also. So the way I go about measuring that is similar to the Scud coat, and the same the way I would do the top coat, and that would be I would fill 3 buckets of sand up and 1 bucket of cement up. For the water, now the thing that I would drop here would be the SBR. You no longer need the SBR because the coat on the wall below is pretty much, it is your key. So you're just keying basically plaster to plaster, sand cement to sand cement. And again, suction, high suction, it actually slightly does help bond as the keys the stuff together as well. But again, too much suction, it dries out too quick, it weakens the mix, and it'll blow off your render. So again, 3 to 1. And with my water, I would add a capful, on the most, a capful of motor mix and a capful of waterproofer in the same quantity as a lidful, again as the Scud, but most likely would drop the SBR. If you want to keep a little bit of SBR in, that would be okay as well. But bear in mind, SBR does actually speed up the setting time of the render. As well, if it's in the cold, you could potentially use Jack Frost, some rapid hardener, to set off the render quicker. But again, high suction walls, you never really need it. Don't worry about that. So I'll get into a wee bit more of the coating. So most times I'll coat something. You're already looked at it when you scudded, when it was chipped off, and it was all your preparation. You've already ran your eye around it multiple times. So by this stage, you sort of know what's what. If there's bendy angles, if there used to be a window or there used to be a door that needs scrim taped, I'm calling it scrim taped. I should say meshed up. So the likes of cracked areas, now is the time to put a wee scratch over, bed your mesh in, put another wee lick over, and then run the scratch over. Now is the time to do that. Make sure you push that render right into any voids. Make sure it's well solid. Voids are not good because if moisture gets in there, and then in the frost, water will expand, and that'll blow off your render, make cracks bigger. So you're going to want to make sure you're pushing every little void out. The other thing you might want to do, if you're not as capable of just keeping it nice and flat and neat with your trowel, you might want to give it a bit of a straight edge and fill in some hollows now. This will make the next stage much easier. So again, keeping it nice and flat and getting a nice key on for your top coat, and then obviously wash everything down as you go. So now we need to talk about setting beads. I'll do it quick, as this video's more on the finishing and the backgrounds and the mixes. Also, there is a video of setting beads and rules on the channel already, and if there's not, or them videos need updated, I will spend some time and really do a nice video on that too. But basically, the best way to set these beads is, so they're 10mm or they're 12mm plastic PVC bead, and the best way to go about fitting them is actually to butter up the corner first and then push the bead in, really bed that bead in. And the reason you want to do that is that will kill any voids in behind the bead, similar to what I was saying there earlier. You don't want moisture in behind. And the more you fill the back of the bead, the stronger and more reinforced it's going to be. So it won't be hollow, it won't be boast, it will be stuck on, it'll be solid. And then you want to plumb that up both ways. If it's a corner here, you got to plumb it both ways. And then you're going to want to pull your trowel up and down, keeping it off the very high part of the bead and just working the mesh in, and then scratch it, and you're good to go with that bead. Windows, I could spend all day talking about beading windows, but to keep it short and sweet, you can stick your head on first, plumb it up, and measure it off the frame. So for talk's sake, say it comes off the frame 5 inches, you're going to make sure that the right side, the middle, and the left are 5 inches off the frame to the edge of the bead, and that's called the margin. So you're going to have a plumb and you're going to have a margin. The best way to actually fit beads on the outside is to actually eyeball them off the frame. If the window's slightly off, if you put a bead on plumb, it is going to look very bad. If the people aren't fitting new windows when you're coming to do this job, you might have to decide what's best to do. Do you stick with the level or do you run with the windows? What's going to look better, and again, what's going to be the best job? Again, margin off your reveals as also, so that the top, the middle, and the bottom, if the head's 5 inches, you're going to have to do the same left and right on both reveals, 5 inches right round. And just for talk's sake, if you put on the left bead and all of a sudden you're 5 1/4, you might want to start again and pull everything out 5 1/4. You're going to want to work off the highest point. So that's beads covered. Rules. Now, if you're going to use rules, it's pretty much the same idea. Bar, you're going to nail them on. Rules are timbers, battens, whatever you want to call them. I call them rules, and I do the same thing. I put them on plumb, and then I measure them off the window. Sometimes windows are twisted, guys, believe it or not. A plaster can probably get a wall straighter than a window frame is. So sometimes they do vary in the middle, and it can be hard because you can't twist wood to suit that. So it can be very hard to fit rules. Personally, I really do like the finish of rules compared to beads, and I think beads potentially aren't as superior of a job long term. So now we're getting to the actual part that you get paid for, unless you're doing acrylic render over the top. So basically, this is where the money is paid for: a nice clean finish, nice and smooth sand cement render. But to get to this stage, we had to go through many stages. This stage is no different. You're going to want to wet down or scratch coat. Again, the bottom, you might want to hold off and wetting the very bottom, as water does tend to fall on the walls and soak in slightly off the ground at the very bottom, sort of half a foot up. So you're going to want to be careful what way you do wet this. Again, do find sometimes the corners set like crazy, they do dry. So you're going to want to wet them, or you're going to want to, be smart when you're coating. Maybe not coat them to the very end and then straighten them. Or, again, smart, close them in. You can close it in with the feather edge or quickly with the float, so that it's not drying as much. So, the stages of the render, of the final process, the top coat, the float coat, is your mix and your preparation. So, the mix for this, I would typically go 4 sand, 1 cement. That's 4 to 1. And basically, guys, you might have noticed by now that everything coming out is getting a bit weaker. That's very important. If you don't do that, you risk the coats blowing off each other. So each coat's weaker as it comes out. So for the water of the mix, I would typically, same as the scratch, 1 capful per bucket of water of the plasticizer, and the same for the waterproofer. Mix that round, add it to the mixer, and then there's going to be 4 to 1. You might need to top up the water, but again, every time I run out of a bucket of water, I fill it again and I put the same additives in, so that all the ratios of this is going the same. People always ask me how much water. It's very hard to tell you guys, if not impossible. And the reason for that is the sand. The sand's sitting outside. If it's been raining for a week, the sand's wet. That means that there's going to be less water going into your mix, which means that you have to reduce your water somewhat. Otherwise, the stuff's going to be just pure water. It's going to be Scud coat, and we don't want Scud coat. We want something nice and fluffy, easy to spread. Again, if you find it's maybe not as easy to spread and you want to up the mortar mix, that's grand. Everybody does their own thing, and everything slightly tweak. Everything I've taught you here in this video, feel free to tweak it to suit yourself, because everybody is different. People might not be as fast as me. People might be faster than me, so you might want to actually reduce. You might want to mix different stuff. You mightn't be doing something so big, so you may want to do less mortar mix, because the mortar mix will slow down the setting time. So now that we've covered the mix, the next stages are going to be coating, straightening, and then floating and sponging, finishing. So when you're coating with your hog and trowel, I personally start on the left, and I know loads that do, and honestly, it doesn't make a single difference. See all the rumours of you'll drop less, it's all nonsense. You have to do what you're comfortable with doing. If you're comfortable starting on the left and hooking it in, if your body feels better doing that, do it that way. If you're confident and comfortable working from right to left and doing like a backhand stroke, that's all well and good also. Just as long as you're getting it on as neat as possible. Coating to me is all about keeping it as neat as possible, putting good pressure in, making sure you're bonding that render into every key, every scratch mark you've done, and making sure there's no air bubbles. If you're finding air bubbles, guys, nip them out, cut them out, and coat again. You've trapped air. Don't trap any air in your render. You will find that out when you come to straighten. If you've trapped air, you'll find wee bits popping out on you and stuff, and it won't be nice. So that's the main thing with coating. On as straight and flat as possible to the eye and to the hand, you'll feel it, and then on to the straightening process. So basically, you straighten off your high points, which will be your beads or your rules, your corner beads around your windows. So you might want to start working from them and filling in all your hollows. Any hollows, they'll be the smooth parts that they're not being teared up by the feather edge or the shredded edge, depending on what type of edge you use. I have seen people using box edges, and what they will do, believe it or not, they will actually leave it closed in. So your eye has to pick up a different texture then to fill in because things are a bit smoother looking. So you'll have to, on the most, you'd have to have a bit more experience about you to actually use a box level or a box edge to straighten up a wall. I wouldn't recommend it for anybody watching this, as most people watching this are probably beginners to plastering and beginners to rendering, maybe DIYers or apprentices still learning, or somebody who they've done rendering before but just not in a while and they're wanting like a refresher course, and that's why they're here. So I would definitely lean you towards the feather edge. And once you get everything straight, if you did want to pull your feather edge in and close it all in flat, that would be brilliant, because that'll give you a bit more time and it'll make it a wee bit easier to rub up, and you're just sealing the surface slightly, where a third open surface will dry quicker. So obviously once you have everything straightened, depending on the size of wall, by the time you get down a couple of lifts, if you're on a big gable, most likely you're not doing something like a flower pot or a garden wall, so it's small. But soon after you get it all straightened up, you're going to sort of want to feel the render. If it's starting to dry and crusty up, that's the time to float it. Two things to remember when you're floating it. If you're floating it too early, you can pull holes in it and stuff, and then make your job later on when it does set harder. And two, you can rip big chunks out when it's too wet. So you're going to want to get it somewhere in the middle where it is drying, or you're going to want to go around and check the wall and hit the dry spots. Sometimes there's dry spots because the walls aren't straight underneath, which means that your top coat render, maybe it's 5mm in a wee area, and then back out to 10mm in another area and 12mm. So you'll find that the 5mm area, that whole area needs rubbed, and it might not be a big area, it might just be like a foot squared or a metre squared or a couple of meters squared. Sometimes buildings aren't, the bricklayer maybe didn't use a string line or something, or some maybe went too high and it bellied out a bit. So that's what we're here to make it all look pretty and keep it nice and watertight. But again, the floating up and the finishing, you're going to want to get it all floated. Make sure you fill in all the wee holes, get it nice and smooth. Left to right, right to left. Left to right's better because you're coming away from your work and you're seeing it. Again, if you've coated it right to left, you're rubbing it and you're walking away from your work, so you twisting your head to look behind yourself. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe they just start on the far end and come across it. But I like the fact that I can see everything I've done when I'm rubbing it up left to right. I can still see it. I'm not walking past it. So it's all there. It's all in front of me. Again, doesn't really matter as long as you get it nice and smooth. And once you have it all smooth, if you want to give it another wee sponge, which will help just smooth it that little bit more. It will also help fill in tiny little pip holes. There shouldn't really be any, but sometimes the sponge is as good as a float when it comes to just touching the wee area up. And guys, that's it. Clean up. Make sure you've washed your tools, your mixer, scrape back the floor and clean up the floor, windows, doors, whatever they might be. Make sure you leave a nice clean job. I just want to quickly go over the tools that I used throughout these clips and footage. So, firstly, you will need a brush and a shovel. You will need buckets and potentially a wheelbarrow. You will need a mixer, or you're going to have a lot of hard work with the shovel on a board. You'll likely need some boards. I think that's the side of the preparation done and the mixing. So other than that, then you're going to need some water brushes for cleaning, for splashing, for soaking, possibly a hose, or some empty cups to pour the water down with the wall down with water. On the tool sides of things, you're obviously going to need the hawk and trowel. That's the main tools of a plasterer. You're going to need a float. You're going to need a sponge float or just a nice smooth card body sponge. You don't necessarily need power floats or anything like that. Again, you're doing large areas, can be very handy. You're going to need a straight edge. You're going to need a hammer and a saw. I think I've pretty much covered all the tools there. Possibly might need like a scraper, a floor scraper, and point and shell. Again, depending on the job you do, you might not need those tools. You might need a chisel, and then again, you might need some cloths for cleaning up at the end. Also, materials wise, obviously you're going to need the sand, cement, and then you're going to need your waterproofers, your SBR, and your mortar mix or plaster sizer. I think that's pretty much all the things you'll need. Obviously, timber or beads, mesh, nails, lots of different things depending on the type of job. And again, just want to thank you for watching. I want to special thanks to all the subscribers and to the people who have been actually sending money recently on like super thankses. And I wanted to cover that because obviously this video has so much detail that has came from my hard work and my knowledge of actually the knowledge really just comes, guys, from doing the hard work, learning the hard way. What is easier? What is harder? What is better? What is best? What is faster? All those things again, and I'm happy to share it with you all. Of course, I could chop this up into many videos, make it online, make people have to pay for the videos. But personally, I'm very happy if this helps some homeowners or especially young guys and girls, whatever you are coming into the trade. If it's helping you even the tiniest wee bit, and you can tweak it and make it even better. That's even better. That's what it's all about, sharing the knowledge, and it does mean a lot to me when people do say thanks and show what way it has helped them and what way it has pushed their game forward. That's what it's all about.
I want to.